If I was going to be asked what were my 3 favorite songs, the funny thing is, in the 21st century, we have access to centuries and centuries of development of music. So you're talking about millions and millions of memories, permutations of memory, of different approaches, cover versions, original versions, traditions that have altered in the course of 1 century. But let's dig into the DNA of what's going on. I'd say probably one of my all-time favorite songs is John Cage's Imaginary Landscape. It's a composition that was made essentially about radio frequencies, skipping records, and this idea of invisibility.
Competitive models and the level of equipment may vary.
And the eerie thing about John Cage is that his approach to indeterminacy and chance processes really mirrors how people think about algorithmic processes in computers and the way that we look at pulling fragments of text and code to create new composition. So like I was saying, John Cage's Imaginary Landscape is one of my favorite songs. And the reason it's important to me is it's essentially one of the first compositions to think about the way technology has transformed the idea of a composition. It's not just the way that you can play back, frequencies and sounds. There have been other pieces that have done that, but at the same time, by opening it up to this idea of randomness and permutation, it really set the tone for how you can think about prototypes for DJ culture and the way that you can think about found sound, found memory, and indeterminate processes looking at the scope of what was available. So if you have a cathedral radio in 1939, the culture at that time was streaming through this device. It was creating an entire context that people would gather around, and just that was the campfire of that time. So if you're listening to, say, for example, Orson Welles' piece, War of the Worlds, that was one of the first propaganda pieces to create a sense of a false narrative that was played out over mass media.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our eyes lead to the inescapable assumption that those strange beings who landed in the Jersey farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars.
An incredible thing, but it wouldn't have been available without the technology at the time, which is the central theme was radio. TV came along much later, and of course the internet much, much later. But this idea of network systems, of pulling fragments from all these different radio stations, switching the dial randomly, being able to cut, so to speak, between all these frequencies, and at the same time establish a sense of proscenium, a sense of being able to create a theater of these frequencies, a theater of these kinds of skipping records and sounds. That was something John Cage, I think, really set a tone for the 20th century. So as a composer, I'm very interested in the archive, which is why we're here at the Metropolitan Museum. And, it's kind of funny because there was a Russian composer, Mussorgsky, who did this piece, Portraits, at an exhibition. And it was about proscenium space, moving through a museum and responding to compositions for the paintings around you and the sense that the art and the music were in dialogue. John Cage turned that upside down by making the composition itself a kind of an invisible cathedral. I love the idea of that as a kind of a response to dematerialization, to pulling all of the fragments of this kind of 1939 era, when, looking at the rise of mass culture, the idea of this notion that everyone has access to a certain amount of songs, but radio itself was the way that influenced the imagination at the time. So by calling it Imaginary Landscape, you can see he had this sort of wireless imagination way before many of the things that we are experiencing in the 21st century.